Hello and welcome fellow motorsports fans. We are finally back with hopefully more regular episodes of Sports Car Race Week Review, and today we are going to be talking about the 12 hours of Sebring, including yet another Cadillac disaster and lots more storylines. Please excuse any background noise you might hear. There is a bit of a storm going on outside, but that can't stop us from talking about some fantastic racing. So we'll get to it in a second, but as is tradition on this channel, we begin with the slower classes first. Now, with support categories in IMSA, normally the big headline story is the Michelin Pilot Challenge, but unfortunately I was actually not able to watch the race just yet. That's part of the reason for why this episode comes out this late in the week, because I was waiting for IMSA to upload the Pilot Challenge race, and unfortunately it hasn't happened yet, so I couldn't go back and watch it, and therefore I think there's no point trying to talk about just some vague results with any context. So therefore we'll get to the MX-5 Cup, which, as we all know, is one of the most entertaining forms of racing out there. And race 1 this weekend was one of those all-time classics, although in a very different way. Instead of the usual like super large pack racing of like 10 to 15 MX-5 cars all nose to tail throughout the race, we had a very different story of an immediate breakaway pack with 3 cars, including Cicero, Zilisch and eventual winner Gonzalez. They were breaking away instantly from lap 1, while the veterans Gresham Wagner and Jared Thomas worked their way to the front of the upper midfield, so to P4 and 5, and then essentially went on their mission to go and catch the lead pack to lead the midfield essentially to close that gap back down. And was really beautiful to watch these veterans of that particular category go to work. Unfortunately for Thomas, it didn't quite work out in the end. Wagner, on the other hand, did make his way onto the podium instead of Cicero, so that was very nice for him. And we already had to point out here, the rookie Workman was already on it. He actually followed the two veterans and also brought home a very, very nice result. And Weston Workman is the other guy we want to focus on here in general throughout the weekend, because he actually got his maiden victory in only his 4th ever race in race 2. And it was a pretty convincing victory, at least as far as MX-5 Cup victories go. So he was scrapping for it throughout the entire race at least, and didn't just luck his way into it at the end or anything like that. So a super impressive drive, and certainly a guy we will keep a very close eye on throughout the season. The other very impressive rookie is Nathan Nicholson, and he managed to go from P30 all the way to P10 in the first race. So a very, very impressive rookie charge. Unfortunately, it seems he might not quite have the pace to do what Workman did and like fight for wins just yet. But yeah, he's been consistently in like that sort of upper midfield lead pack. Or as we could see in race 1, he can work his way back there if he somehow doesn't start there immediately. So a very, very nice guy to watch as well. And unlike what we maybe thought after Daytona, it looks like he is the much more interesting rookie than Julian Da Costa, who was still good, but not quite as flashy as he was at moments throughout the Daytona weekend. Obviously, Connor Zilisch is a vastly impressive guy whenever he steps into an MX-5 Cup, but since we'll be talking about him during the actual Sebring stuff, we'll just skip that for a moment and get straight to the Porsche Carrera Cup North America, because that's also, first of all, one of the better Porsche series, not an elite Porsche Cup series like the Germany or UK one, but it's a very good field, and it's got one of the protagonists from last year's Germany Porsche Cup with Luc Hartog coming over, and he immediately looks like a championship contender straight out the gate. One race won pretty convincingly. Unfortunately, actually even lost out on P2 during the second race. He finished P2 on the road behind Gustav Burton, who we'll get to in a second. But he did get a penalty and dropped down to P3. Nonetheless, a clear-cut championship favorite, or at least contender at this point, no doubt about it. The other guy in this equation is someone who I didn't have on my radar at all. As I said, Gustav Burton, barely heard from the guy, to be honest, and he was really impressive straight out the gate, consistently, well, P2 in the first race and then winning the second race, so a consistent top 2 contender, and yeah, looks to be the main rival, I guess, at least as far as we can tell from just one round. The third guy in the mix being Ryan Yardley, the only non-rookie out of the trio, and yeah, consistent performances, but wasn't quite able to take a top 2 on merit this time out. The midfield looks pretty packed in the series, and we'll keep an eye on it over the course of the season, but I don't think it's worth talking too much about it just yet. So instead, the last of the covered support categories, the Lambo Super Trofeo North America. And here we had a guy who is familiar to all of you who like the feeder series side of racing, because Kiko Porto was my man to watch throughout the weekend, driving the number 4 ANSA Motorsports Lamborghini together with Nico Zamin. And they did an amazing job. They won race 1 together. They should have won race 2. Unfortunately, they had a brief power issue, power loss thingy, whatever, some sort of mechanical or electric glitch did cost them the win in the end. A bit unfortunate, but that's racing for you. Nonetheless, Kiko Porto was leading that entire first stint until the pit stop. As I said, he was leading his entire stint during race 1 as well. So a guy to keep an eye on, even though he, apparently can't progress on the junior formula ladder no more. He'll certainly do alright in sports cars if this is what we can expect from him going forward. The other traditional car to watch out for in the series is Danny Formal in the number 1 WTR Andretti car. He's got a new partner with Ryan Norman this year, and it's been a tiny bit rough, you know. They couldn't quite get back to fighting for the win and immediately defending their championship title. But they look to be in the mix. It's a very small top class anyway, I have to say. It's not the most stacked Super Trofeo series out there. So whatever, we'll keep an eye on how this develops, but we do know Danny Formal is quality in one of those Super Trofeo cars. Now anyway, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Let's get to the 12 hours. The 12 hours of Sebring provided an extremely entertaining battle throughout the GTP class for really all the 12 hours. Unfortunately though, as is tradition nowadays, the pace setters, the Cadillacs, once again did not manage to actually take home the result. In particular, the 01, yet again, not able to win a race. I am very used to this as a long-term 01 fan, but nonetheless, we do have to talk about it a little bit because, yeah, the Caddies looked poised to win this race. The 31 in particular was the pace setter throughout large parts of the race until eventually Pippo Durrani, with his usually interesting racing style, shall we say, managed to collide with a GTD and put it into a wall or over a wall, as you can see on your screen here in case you somehow missed it. Yeah, what a way to end a very... It should have been a win. They had it basically already. Like, it didn't look like there was going to be any challenge really from anyone, at least not on merit. Sure, some safety car fuckery or anything, but yeah, what a heartbreaking way to lose this race. Afterwards, we had the 01 back in win contention, back in the lead. They were leading some parts of the race anyway, and they then looked set to win this race. Although I have to say I did have my suspicions, because again, if you followed this car throughout the years a little bit, you might be used to this, where they are in win contention, but they don't get it over the line, at least not if it's one of those like big prestigious endurance races. And yeah, it sort of came as it had to come, with Louis Delatraz pulling off a fantastic and very ballsy move to steal the win from Sebastian Bourdais in the closing stages of the race. Again, I'll show it to you on the screen here, and like from the helicopter type cam, it was so telegraphed, wasn't it? Or at least I was sitting there and you could see the move coming, but obviously Bourdais he can't see what we can see, and so it was inevitable, really. It felt so inevitable, but yet it was very hard to pull off. Some contact along the way, very hard racing. Can't take anything away from Louis Delatraz, obviously one of the elite prototype drivers right now, and he's showing that he can do it in GTP just as reliably as he could in the LMP2. Yeah, what a heartbreaking way to once again not win for Cadillac, but it is what it is. In general, I have to say, the GTP BOP, or like the general level of all the cars, was very balanced. The BOP worked out quite nicely. The Lambo was off the pace, as you'd expect from a new platform. That's fine. They still managed to do a very nice race, I have to say. Like, in general, they executed very well. They kept themselves in position. I think they stayed on the lead lap throughout the whole thing, and that's about all they could do with a car that's just slightly off the pace. Otherwise, very balanced. All 4 platforms at least had their chances, although, as I said, Caddy clearly brought the best package here. last but not least for this class, I have to highlight Julian Andlauer yet again, because the guy also just keeps impressing so much whenever he steps into a prototype. And unlike Delatraz, for him that's a new experience. He only had his prototype debut over the winter in the Asian Le Mans series, and he's been so on it ever since, in the GTPs as well, both here and in WEC, so keep an eye on him if you aren't already. LMP2 was mainly the story of a whole bunch of young drivers, at least if you ask me. We had Conor Zilic taking yet another huge endurance win, doubling up from his Rolex win earlier in only his, well, second ever prototype race. He's won 2 of them, so go figure. I think the guy can drive a racing car. Once again, it was also him to actually finish the race, so it's not like he just got carried by his team or anything. He was the guy to drive it over the line in first. So what a talent. I've been talking about him a lot throughout the last couple of weeks, but yeah, I'll continue to do so throughout the year, so you better get used to it now. The other guy we got to highlight is Johnny Atker, the recent Formula 3 dropout, I suppose, who's transitioned now to LMP2 racing as well. And he was the driving factor behind a brilliant recovery drive from the number 33, the only Ligier in the LMP2 pack. And they actually somehow managed to bring this car back all the way to P4, despite running what's probably the worst bronze driver on the grid, or at very least he's in contention for this title, unfortunately. And they had a really rough couple of opening hours, but yeah, still somehow P4. So what a drive, and spearheaded by Johnny Atker. So congrats there, I suppose. Another usual big player in this category, the number 04 with George Kurtz, one of the best bronzes in the field, had a very, let's call it an eventful race. They also had their fair share of unlucky moments in the opening stages, fought their way back really well to be in podium contention in the closing stages, and then only for Colin Brown to make a really uncharacteristic mistake to sort of spin himself out on Fraga. I believe they were fighting for P2, maybe it was P3, don't quote me on this. And yeah, what a way to waste a brilliant race, but at least they showed that this car both has the pace, as we know anyway, but they can also mount a comeback drive, even if it wasn't quite meant to be at the end. And last but not least, we need to highlight Dan Goldberg, who is continuously establishing himself as one of the front-running M drivers, again with George Kurtz and Ben Keating. He's right in that mix, and he'll be one to watch in the coming years in IMSA. Now, the GTD, a bit more messy, as it often is. I find the GTD racing a bit tough to follow recently in IMSA. I don't really know why, but the pro field really delivered at the very least. Yes, we had a few unfortunate retirements and incidents very early on, and most notably the Pfaff McLaren, almost said Pfaff Porsche there, had to retire after only lap 1, I believe, a lap 1 incident, so that was a bit unfortunate. But afterwards we had a fantastic race with the Corvettes having to come from the back. In particular, Sims had a fantastic sort of second stint in the race to bring the car from all the way deep down in the GTD-M field to the sharp end of the GTD Pro field. That was fantastic and very inspiring to watch. Unfortunately, that charge ended very late in the race when Lauren Heinrich spun them out fighting for P3. A bit unfortunate, but it is what it is. The Corvettes are still there. Very much like at Daytona, the Fords still aren't, not really worth talking about, unfortunately. This car just isn't quite race ready, it almost feels like. Now, the winner, and we finally got the win we deserve, sort of, after this car got wrecked quite early on during Daytona. The number 14 Vassar Sullivan Lexus is back on top, and Jack Hawksworth not only made sure personally that this car would end up back on top, but he did so with some impressive big boy moves in the closing stages, which I'll hopefully be showing to you right now. And yeah, man alive, just look at this. This is a guy who really wanted to win this race. The Lexus had the pace, sure, all race long, but so did the Ferraris, so did the Corvettes, so did the Porsches. You still have to execute it, and they did so with perfection to earn themselves a very deserved win. Last but not least, we have the GTD category, and yeah, congratulations to Ward Racing for winning yet another one, also doubling up from their Daytona win. But I have to say, for me, the real storyline here isn't the winners, it's the retirements. And I want to highlight the number 32 Mercedes in particular. So unfortunate, working their way up to P2, having like a really nice start to the race, only for terminal engine failure within the first, I want to say, like 30 minutes of the race. Obviously a very rare occurrence in GT3 racing to have something like this, and then from the sharp end of the field very early on in an endurance race. That's just heartbreaking. And there was more of those stories, really, as is often the case in those GTD races. It feels a bit like a battle royale, you know, you just need to survive, and if you actually get through the race and don't just farm penalties and damage or something, then you've got a very good chance at fighting for the win in the closing stages. And yeah, Ward Racing did so very well, perfectly executed race. Now, it's your time to hit the comment section. Let me know all of your favorite Sebring stories, and more importantly, if you follow the IMSA support paddock, let me know who you're keeping an eye on throughout this season in the various categories. I do like to have some more discussion outside of the big headline events too. And otherwise, if you want to support me, please like the video, leave a subscription, and I'll see you in the next video.